I used to just think I was so rough on my body that that explained all the pain I was having. I would live in Florida and have low vitamin D, which is weird because I lived in Florida. I seem to always have mouth sores, these mouth ulcers where the dentist would be like, it's nothing, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it.
And I can't hide, 'cause growing pains are keeping me up at night. Hi everyone, welcome back to this week's episode on Take a Pain Check. I'm so excited to have Amanda joining me today. Hi Amanda, can you give me a brief introduction about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your hobbies, your education, your career, what you've been up to recently.
Okay, that's those good loaded questions. Hello, Natasha. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Amanda Che. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. Education, I have a bachelor's in psych, which I learned is one of the lowest paid. So I got a master's in counseling, and then I decided I didn't want to use it. That's a lot. It's a lot to be in that field. I'm a highly sensitive person, so hearing people discuss their challenges was really draining on me. So let's see, what have I feel like I've done a little bit of everything in life. Currently, I am the author of the book called The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. I have lupus, I have SLE. And then I also own a company called Wonderment where I run stress reduction trainings and mindfulness trainings for businesses because stress is a lot nowadays and there's some things that we can do to manage it.
For
Oh,
sure.
you asked one more. One
Okay.
more. What do I like to do for fun? I mean, I always love to travel. Always. So give me a place to go. I have a lovely, sweet white lab, and we walk over 100 miles a month. And I teach some yoga, and I like to be active. And I have some two daughters. One daughter has lupus. She's 20, almost 24, and then another daughter who's in college here, and she does not have lupus, and we hope she never does.
I hope that she never does either, because that's a lot. But yeah, traveling sounds amazing. I feel like that's something that a lot of people want to do, but some people just want to stay away from traveling because they just don't like flights and things like that. But yeah, no,
Oh yeah.
thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned you
Yeah.
have lupus, your daughter has lupus. We're going to talk a lot about lupus in this episode, but when were you diagnosed with lupus and what were your initial symptoms that led you to go see a healthcare professional?
I come a different route than most people. So, in general, it takes between 5 to 7 years to receive a lupus diagnosis for many reasons. It mimics lots of diseases, it presents uniquely for each individual. But for me, I wasn't diagnosed until my mid 40s, but I have had lupus since I was pregnant with my first one. Her name is Anna, and I was a young 24-year-old when I got pregnant with her, and I was very, very sick, multiple hospitalizations, 7 times. In fact, I had many trips to the ER and feeding tubes that would come shooting out of my mouth. So that's most likely what was the event that made lupus come active in my body. So we know that there's a genetic disposition that kind of lays dormant in the cells and it needs the perfect environmental trigger. And mine was being pregnant with her. Although people, being in a car wreck or sun exposure, or like Anna, she had mono and she developed it. So if you saw me across the years until diagnosis, there were things like, of course, a lot of joint pain. And as a self-proclaimed beast of working out, I used to just think I was so rough on my body that that explained all the pain I was having. I would live in Florida and have low vitamin D, which is weird because I lived in Florida. I seem to always have mouth sores, these mouth ulcers where the dentist would be like, it's nothing, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. And then I would have things like low platelet counts. And so if you looked at one or another, it might be like, well, that's kind of weird. And most of the doctors wouldn't think anything about it. But inside I knew something was wrong. And so I just had to be relentless in being like, something is wrong with me and someone is going to pay attention. And there were many doctors that did like this, like, oh, you aren't young anymore. And I'm like, oh, holy crap, don't say that to me. So I had to be a fighter in order to get my diagnosis. It took a long time though.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a lot, and you did have lots of different symptoms kind of presented to you, but it takes a really long time for them to get a diagnosis. For me, it was super quick. It was in a couple weeks, so it
Mm.
it
Oh,
was I
nice.
was lucky, but I that's definitely not the case for a lot of people. I mean, I talked to so many people, and they get misdiagnosed or they've been diagnosed with a condition for so long, and then after a while their doctor's like, you don't actually have that and you have something else.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
insane.
Well, that explains why you can feel both happy to get a diagnosis and then like you were punched in the gut and you double over, right? You're happy to finally I knew something was wrong, but then you're like the reality of, man, now I have to deal with this.
Exactly. It's frustrating, but you sometimes you get answers, sometimes you don't. It's a lot, definitely for a patient. I think that can definitely impact your mental health and just like
Uh,
general isolation. So how did that work for you?
there was a lot of unknowns, right? I certainly thought I could like handle everything, and this was probably the first thing that I'm like, well, I can't control it, right? I thought I could control it. Well, maybe if I just stop eating some sugar, or maybe I just stop running, I won't run anymore, and then I'm going to be okay. But the reality of a incurable chronic condition means that it's there all the time, and so that was really. mm, overwhelming at times. And certainly because I feel like my entire life I have been a very strong health advocate in the things that I've done, how I've eaten food, what I've done, the mindfulness, all these things I have practiced, and it felt quite unfair. And I was like rageful that I've done all. I could have ate Doritos, and Oreos all the time, and then I would have felt that I did all the things I wanted to do. So it was a big mental drain, and there was a lot of frustration associated with it.
I think that's a big thing. And then also, why me? I think the biggest question that I had was,
Hmm.
why me? I was such a healthy child. I was so great. I didn't do anything wrong. Why me? And I think you kind of are in denial, but also point fingers at yourself and blame yourself for like all these things that you done when really it's so random. Like there's no, I don't get it.
Mm.
Why we get it. And so it's interesting because like I had to change my mindset and not be like, why me? And this is my new life. How am I going to navigate it? So did you feel
Yeah.
something similar to that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And there's still days where I will get angry. A similar story is that I've taught group fitness and yoga and all this stuff for since I was 24, right? I've taught, and there was a person I teach with at the gym, and she just told me she had breast cancer. And I think I kind of like projected my anger onto her. I was like, I'm so mad for you. You have been working out for all these years. You've been doing everything right, and you still get it. And it's the same thing with us, right? Like, we've done all these things. Like, why me? Like, give it to someone else that, I don't know, just not me. Give it to anyone else. To me,
Uh,
it is that frustration. But thankfully, I have to often have this. And sometimes I just let myself be angry, be mad. It sucks. You're right. But then there's times where I realize that life could be a lot worse.
yeah.
People still die from lupus all the time. Life could be better, sure, but I kind of hang out in the middle, and I feel like if I reside in the middle, almost in everything in life, that it's going to be okay. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy because life is not guaranteed to be easy, but we know that sometimes we have to break in order to come back together again.
I definitely have those thoughts when I see people on social media post about their conditions. I'm so grateful for my condition right now because it's not the worst. And yes, I'm in so much pain and my feelings are valid and how I feel is valid. But
Mm,
just looking at those posts and how other people feel, it's like, I think it could go both ways, in two different ways.
it
One
could.
being I'm so grateful, but then also dismissing my feelings and being like, okay, they're going through so much, my feelings don't really matter, or what I'm going through is
Mm.
not important. So you can take that in two ways. But for me, at least, I've just been really grateful for my case. And so I think, yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I do take it that way too.
Yeah, yeah. And something I would say, this is kind of a weird recommendation, but if you're ever feeling really bad about yourself, if you've ever been on any Facebook groups, like there are some lupus groups out there that have, 40,000 people, and some of the things that people post rock my world. Like, I just had 8 teeth removed today, and I'm like, oh my God, 8 teeth. So I feel a little bit better sometimes from hearing the extremes that go on, and you can just find your balance in the middle. And it's hard though.
For sure.
Then you feel guilty for looking at someone else's post to see how bad people feel. And there's just no right or wrong answer, I think, as long as you try to honor what you're feeling right now and take that awareness from it and try not to be a jerk and respond back in a bad way in life and just move forward the best you can.
Yep, 100%. And you've lived with lupus for a good amount of time. So how do you think your symptoms have changed over time? Has it become better, worse? What does that look like?
It feels like it gets worse. when I was writing the book and I had a lot of stress from writing the book, self-imposed stress. I was extremely sick. It's probably the worst I'd ever been. So I don't know. I don't feel like I would love to be like, I'm in remission. My body doesn't know what that word is yet, but if like the CAR T cell therapy, that some of these upcoming clinical trials that are going on with hopes of lupus. So while I might be relatively stable and my disease is still, continuing to progress, I can at least look forward and be like, there's something on the horizon. And my hopes that if I don't get it, perhaps one day my daughter will be able to receive that.
So I feel like we've kind of already started talking about your daughter, but
But yeah.
I'm gonna leave that for a bit because I definitely want to learn more about you. And then, even as a parent, it's just you bring such an interesting perspective. You're a parent that has a child that has it, but then you also live with it. So maybe it's even a reflection in a way of like been through and what you can see through her. But wondering when you did get that diagnosis, and how did you learn about what lupus was? Like, was that through your doctors, your parents? Like, what was the situation?
Yeah. I talk about in the book that I get a diagnosis, I get a prescription, right? Of course, more labs, and then I'm like flung out of the rheumatologist's office, and I'm like, I don't even get like a bumper sticker or like a T-shirt or even like a flyer that says like, "Yippee, you have lupus." And so, I do what everyone else does. I first, of course, Google it in the car before you start driving. And then you get home and you do more Googling. And behind me, there are books. There are lots of lupus books that I purchased, and they were all, I don't feel like they represented me, or they were really clinical and dry. And I still had a lot of questions of what lupus would look like for me. And I consider myself very educated, but I still didn't know. And it was only when I spent, a year and a half writing the book did I really, really feel the depth of what lupus was, what I was up against, what, my life may look like. And, that's why I wrote the book, because I didn't want women to feel so alone like I felt. You were just kind of left out there. And family, they were all good, right? They tried to be supportive, and they just do like a quick, let me just look at this online lupus. Okay. And they don't really know as well. So we were just like in a big ball of confusion about what the future may look like.
You mentioned how you read books and really to understand it. And for me, I just told my parents to read for me. So
Yeah.
and I wonder, like, was it easy for your daughter to kind of learn about lupus because she saw you live with it for a few years? So
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing was when Anna was diagnosed, it was only 5 months after I was diagnosed. Because once I was diagnosed, I would look at her and be like, oh my gosh, she is exactly like me. So she got her diagnosis quick. And she was also, maybe she had just graduated college. So she's trying to start running, her real life and do all these adult things. She's not as much of a reader as me. And because I was writing a book, she was like, no, I don't want I would call her all the time, look at this clinical trial I found, or look at this information. And it just wasn't that interesting to her. So I think that she took her own information when she needed to, how she needed to. She told me she read my book, but I'm not quite convinced she did. And that's okay, because we still have each other to share ideas on, and we do that all the time. I know that people learn many different ways, and it's okay. Whatever you need to do, however you need to gather that information, as long as it works for you, that's what's most important.
for sure. And then also unreliable, proper sources. Because I think some people
Yes.
go into like random links and their information. But yeah, I agree. It could be an informative
Amen to that.
Video, podcast, whatever, book.
Yeah.
Through real life patients living with the disease. I think there's just so many different ways to get that information. And you're right. I feel like everyone's at their own pace too. Like, no, you can't really push into it. For me, for a couple years, I didn't want to read and learn, but then I got into it and I was like, I'm gonna live with this. So everyone kind of takes their own time, and I think that's totally fine.
It is. And that's a good point. When I was speaking, one of the physicians I interviewed for the book, her name is Jennifer Rogers. She's a rheumatologist out of Duke University. She was telling me how important it is for people to continue to tell their stories. And I was saying, sometimes you don't want to tell. Like, I don't want to tell the male woman, I'm tired of telling these stories. And she's like, I understand, but perhaps we need to keep in mind that different people need to hear things different ways. We could all say the same thing, but we put our own spin on it. And so for people, it takes them, different individuals or different methods to hear what they're saying and really resonate with them. And so, I think that's just continues to add value to what we've been talking about.
I know when you live with lupus, it's not only impacting one aspect of your body, it's really just like your whole body. So are there other specialists that you see for your condition?
I do. I have a neurologist. I have a physical therapist. I have a I call him medical massage therapist because he has lots of knowledge. These are part of my care team, but also number one on my care team is me, because I understand that part of my health has been robbed away, stolen in the night from lupus, but I still hold a great ability to control the health that I have now. And I never underestimate that, even though there may be registered dietitians I talk to or different components like that. I know that what I do every single day, these small actions, make a tremendous impact, not on my overall health, but the way that my lupus shows up and manifests across my life.
You have to see all these different types of health professionals, but you are the one that needs to continuously make those decisions, be part of that care team. If you don't have that motivation to go to the doctor, then nothing's going to happen. So you are the one that's the decision maker and the key player in your health. And a lot of us don't feel that way. We feel like, oh, everything's the doctor's job, or the doctor does all this, but really it stems from you. If you have the condition, and then now it's your job to take that step. Obviously the doctor,
absolutely,
the type of healthcare professional definitely matters. Like if you bond with them, if they're treating you right and if they're listening to you, then that's great. And you don't always get the best people treating you well. So definitely looking into that and finding the better person. And it might take a few tries. I know I went to see multiple rheumatologists at first, trying to find the best one for me, but it's definitely a journey for sure.
Oh, it is such a journey, and there's something to be said. And I agree with you. If you don't have a great doctor, find a new doctor. If you don't trust your doctor, if your doctor says, try this, and you're like, I don't believe you, then we have a problem right there. And it's never as easy as I'm just going to go find a new rheumatologist. Yeah, that could be like an 8-month delay between you go and getting a care, but it is a very important relationship. And I think in all relationships, we need trust and we need mutual respect. I'm not going to come in and scream at my doctor, because I wouldn't do that with my husband. And she's not going to scream back at me. I do love my rheumatologist, and she's really good when she says, hey, your labs are looking like this, or there's something new that's coming up. I want you to look into this. I don't want you to give me an answer. And then you go do your own research and come back to me. To me, that's a really great working relationship where there is open understanding. And I think that's important. We often forget that. Our doctors know a lot, but they also don't know me. And I am pretty great at knowing me.
I definitely agree with that. A lot of times I find that a lot of patients mention, that their doctor didn't listen to them, or, they felt like they weren't heard. And so, but oftentimes maybe health professionals don't see it that way, because, they know that they need to take care of your health, or at least they need to find that medication for you. But then it's a whole holistic aspect when it comes to your healthcare. It's not just medications only, but really in that sense. What was your medication journey like? What else do you do for pain management?
Yeah. So I'm currently on a, hydroxychloroquine, which we all know, one of those drugs we can be on for life, which is good. Then I'm on a monoclonal antibody. Wait, you know the word, Benlysta, another drug that I inject once a week in my body. And those are the main medications that I'm on. They seem to be doing well. I just filmed a YouTube yesterday I have a YouTube channel that I like to talk about with other individuals, and it's about pain. So I dealt with pain. So there's an arsenal. We probably all have an arsenal of things. When I have a neuropathy that goes on when my lupus is moody, I grab some gabapentin, muscle relaxers and things like that. My instinct is not to always pull my medication. I always take my medication every single day. I think it is essential. We should all do that, which reminds me, I haven't done it today, but I will. I never stop it without telling my physician.
Me neither. I have to take.
Yeah, I know, right? As I say that, I'm like, oh, I always take it. Wait, I haven't taken it. But Yeah, it's okay. We're supposed to remind each other. I do think there's a ton of things that we can do that make an impact on how we show up every single day. And that a lot of that comes from self-awareness, being very, very curious and intentional and aware of what you do throughout your day. Like, for example, it seems like nothing, but I cleaned my house for a long time last Saturday from like 10 to 3. And when I sat down at the end, I was like, suddenly, like, I'm exhausted. I just suddenly felt like a weight that was on me. And then my husband and I went to this comedy club, and they had crappy food there. And the next day on Sunday, I was like knocked out. Like, I felt terrible. I had a terrible headache. My legs were throbbing. And I knew that I had caused myself damage and I needed to try to retract. And things like I do, like, of course, besides taking my medication, I knew I needed to walk because sitting down felt a lot worse. And I knew I needed to get out of the house because seeing a different environment would allow my brain to take a little bit of awareness away from how bad I felt to looking around the environment from me. And so the like things like that I think are important. Yes, they're not going to make pain go away, but they do ultimately make an impact, albeit a little small, but how you feel on a daily basis.
It does definitely make an impact. And I think also just trying to find the right things for you. It's so hard to figure out what is going to work. And it definitely takes patience because as patients, we really just want everything to happen so quickly and what we expect
Mm,
things to work so quickly. But in reality, it's not going to happen that way. And it definitely takes time, trial and error, so many different things. Like I remember even for me when I was trying to find some pain management strategies, I'm still struggling to this day to figure that out. I tried so many things. The next day it's not going to work, or there could be something that's better. I need to ask more people. I need to do my research on it. And I've lived with it for 7 years. So I think that even like living with arthritis for 7 years, realizing that there's still going to be more things that you discover along your journey and you
mm.
gotta be patient.
Well, the interesting thing, I just went to a TED Talk last week or so at NC State University, and there was a vet there that he was speaking, and he was talking about his father, who's showing a video of his father, and his father was older, and he looked like he was in a lot of pain, and he said that we don't know pain very well in the medical field. And he was saying, which we know, like I've spent my time, I've worked in the industry before. We greatly need more resources, a better understanding of pain because we don't deal with it well. Most of these, think of some of these narcotics, they don't do a lot to help, but they create dependency and many other issues. So his whole talk on the TED Talk was about how we're studying pain in animals, and in particular, cats and dogs, because they are very similar as compared to doing maybe a trial on a rat and taking that information and parlaying it to humans. They were studying cats and dogs because they can't obviously say they're in pain. So they've gone to these different measures of pain. And it was just a really interesting, honest view about how we are, us dealing with chronic pain and how we don't feel like there's resources and it's being backed up by science. Like, yeah, we still as a medical community don't understand a lot about pain. So how can you tackle your pain and you feel confused? I mean, it's just kind of a cycle that we're all in. And while there's no answers, it made me feel a little bit better, like, aha, they don't know it either.
Yeah, it makes you feel, even though it makes you feel scared and stuff, it makes you feel better
Yep.
because at least you know what's happening. And I think because pain is invisible, people don't see pain. And so that just
Mm,
makes it maybe like 100 times harder to understand and to treat or even to believe. It's like you have that invisible disability aspect of it, at least for me. Obviously, rheumatic diseases can come in like any shape or form, and you could be more disabled in other conditions or even have a more severe case of one of these conditions. But for me, because it's so invisible and because the pain is so invisible, oftentimes I feel like I need to prove it to people. For example,
hmm
like I was going to the airport and I couldn't lift up my luggage and the
mm
lady didn't believe me. So I was like, oh, like I'm in a lot of pain, like I need some help. And she didn't really believe me. She's like, oh, just like put it over there. And I was like, would you be able to help me? And then I had to pull up my like wrist brace, put it on, and then be like, can you help? And then it makes such like you need to make it visible for them to believe it. So it's challenging. And even I had to like get back home and there was a bunch of like flight cancellations and I told them like my medication, like I don't have enough and they kept canceling my flight. And then I put that wrist brace on, and they were like,
Mm.
"Okay, honey, we'll get you on the next flight."
Oh,
Wow.
that
Yeah,
makes me sad. Yeah, it makes me
it's ridiculous. I need to
feel
like,
like I want to like cry for you. Like that. Why is that the case? A similar, like my husband was telling me about his friend whose wife has lupus actually, and he was saying how he thought that the husband was saying that the wife, he thought maybe she was like exaggerating or using it to her advantage. And I almost like, again, almost cried right there. Like, that's so terrible. Why would we think that that has to be done like that? I'm sure have you heard of the term invisible disability?
yep.
Yep. I've been trying to bring that word out to the business side of it because I think so many people do have something. When they go into the work field, they don't tell them they have something going on. So they get no sympathy, unfortunately. And so it's kind of that, like you had to say, you had to prove to someone that you have something physically that we can see. And then I'm going to decide, oh, I can give you some of my sympathy, but not until then. It's frustrating.
It's crazy. I don't, it makes me so upset. But then I can see the other side where there could be people, and they're probably horrible people, if they're trying to make it up and say that they're like disabled or something, but they're not.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
understand, but also it's hard because you don't realize that you might be invalidating some people who are actually feeling that way. It's a tricky situation, and
Yeah.
it's
And,
toxic.
what is it? It's a deep thought as to why we don't give someone our compassion and how much energy does it take for us to give them our sympathy and our empathy? It probably doesn't take much. We're probably better people when we do that. So we probably could always lean more towards giving someone the benefit of the doubt and some more kindness.
We talked a little bit about some of those like changes you've made in your life, but in terms of like the health and wellness aspect,
Mm.
when did you start implementing these habits, and have you seen that day-to-day improvement? How did all of that work for you?
Yes, this is a very, very huge part of my life are all of these components that are your health. Now, most people think when we say the word health, they think of either, oh, you exercise and you eat good food, which is part of it, but there's so many other things that make up our health as well that we have to keep in mind. There's spiritual health, there's career based, there's social, and so I have done that's the base, right? But think of a triangle. My health is my base. I have done those all of my life, as an adult, and I continue to do those now. Things have changed or been altered based on, lupus coming into play. Like I really try hard on a food end, not to eat a lot of sugar or to eat a lot of crappy processed food. Even though it may taste good, I know that there's usually some type of response from my body. Certainly when I'm in a flare or when I feel extra bad or I'm in pain, I try to make sure to chock full a lot of good stuff that we need to eat. For me, I was your workout beast of all of these mixed martial arts and things like that, and now I cannot do that. So I walk a lot. I go hiking. I lift weights. I do yoga, which makes some people in lupus cringe because they feel like the answer people tell them all the time is yoga. That's not the answer. It just works for me. But I do think you need some cardio. You need some strength and you need ways to stretch your body. It's really important, certainly for us that have that joint pain there as well. Um, I'll say two other things. One is that I work really hard on my mental health, understanding it, processing it. I have an awesome counselor. I read a lot. I journal a lot because I think these things all come together. And, throughout the day, you can have how many emotions throughout the day. We need to understand that. And the last one is that I really try to manage my stress. And this is an interesting one. I didn't know this when I was younger, but not all stress is bad. If you think about the idea of you've done things that are stressful, but something good comes out of it, like anyone had a puppy that you raised, or a cat, or you moved, or you went to college, or you had a really big project, or got married, or grew a baby, these are all very, very challenging times. But you come through them, and at the end, you could have some change, you could have some awareness that comes from it. So for me, it's not about just eliminating stress because I know that stress can be a good motivator, but it's understanding how do I need to remove any long-term stress or chronic stress in my life? And that's really where I try to take control.
Yes, good stress and bad stress. I think everyone thinks that stress is bad, but I think it depends on also what are you stressing about. I think sometimes
That's
you
right.
need to have that time where you do let out your emotions. I find oftentimes people are like, just don't cry, just don't let it out.
Mm.
And I think you need to because once you do that, you really like feel what you're feeling, and then after that, you can make those changes or feel better. But you really need to like let those emotions out. And it's hard because a lot of times people don't want you to do that around you, at least.
Well, you know, a lot of people aren't great at doing it. So, of course, they don't want you to do it because if they can't deal with it themselves, they certainly don't want to deal with you when you're crying. I have never stopped crying or held back my tears from my daughters because I wanted them to understand that I'm just a human feeling these things in the world and having this experience is really important to them. And so I've tried to be honest with them and open with them. And usually when something comes out of me, it does, let out. It's like a tea kettle where it doesn't boil over, it lets off a little bit of steam and then it's okay. And so I think that's really important.
And so when you were, I guess, parenting with arthritis, and we're going to kind of like move into that. So parenting with lupus, what did that look like for you?
It was a lot of checking myself. And I think that's a lot of parenting is sometimes we think what we know is best is that we're going to put it on our kids. And I think, now that I'm a little bit older, I can understand that how I deal with situations might not be the same. We'll use Anna here as the way that she's going to deal with it. Certainly in the beginning, when she was younger, I'd be like, you need to go to the doctor. She moved to another state or a city away from me. And I'm like, you need to find a rheumatologist. You need to do these things. And she would be like, whoa, mom, you need to back up. Um, I need to do it. I'll do it when I can. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I would just have to give her that space. And so I think it's important when I think of parenting or parenting someone who does have this condition is to be able to be there for that person without telling them what to do. And as a parent, that's hard because you think you know better, but perhaps my daughter knows equally as well. And there's things that she can teach me. So it's taking that awareness.
It's interesting because you bring such a unique perspective too. So, when was your daughter diagnosed, and what was that like for you bringing her to the doctor? Like, what were those symptoms?
She was just like me, mouth sores, joint pain. She had a really, really, for her 4 years in college were extremely rough physically and mentally. Now we know from lupus. So it would, for me, I just knew she had lupus. When I took her to the doctor, the test results, she went to my same doctor and the doctor was like, yes, once the test, we know there's no one blood test, but once the results came back, basically, and I could have easily been filled with guilt and sadness. And of course I had sadness, but if I could have prevented her from having lupus, I would have, but it's just wasn't anything within my control. And so as I uh, actively work on forgiving myself and being kinder to myself, this is how thankfully it showed up that, I was sad. There were times where I was sad and she knew that I didn't intentionally, I gave it to her, but I didn't actually give it to her. So I think it's a healing space to be able to feel the sadness that your daughter is going through with a disease and also be able to be there with her without adding more to her already heavy burden.
That makes sense. And medication wise, was it very similar? Like, did you find
Oh
that?
yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I know they say everyone is like a unique snowflake when it comes to lupus. We are very, very similar. In fact, where she has had some tests done testing out her Plaquenil levels. And I'm like, okay, so I've taken her stuff and taken it to my doctor, being like, okay, her results showed this. And I've had changes based on her testing method. So it's been very interesting at that. And of course, we've got a few things that are different, but we are very similar.
Can you tell me some challenges that you've had in terms of her having it and you having it, and then also some like good stuff? So, like, what are
Oh,
some
yeah.
stuff? I want to hear both
Oh,
sides.
yeah, yeah. Well, certainly on the end of not the good stuff, where she has told me many a times, I am not here to be a lupus beacon for you. I am not here to be your lupus advocate. I just want to live my life, and I don't want to be out. I don't want to do a podcast because there are a few. I'm like, would you do this podcast? And she's like, I don't want, I don't want to do this. This is your role. So I have to try to remember those things. And there's also times where I would go and respond X, and she's like, I don't want to do X. That's not how I want to process this, or I don't want to talk. My kids have very good boundaries with me. They'll be like, we're done talking about this, or I don't want to discuss this with you. And I'm like, okay. And I have to honor what they request. A few of those challenges there. On the good side is, on days where I feel terrible, so terrible that I don't want to talk to friends, I don't want to do anything, I don't even want to speak to my husband, I will always call her and with a whimpering cry to say, like, I don't feel good. And she gets it every time. And it's like the best hug you could ever get of love, of acceptance. And so it's really nice to be able to have that.
That's nice to hear in a way. I mean, it's
Yeah,
'cause you obviously like seeing your child have that diagnosis too is probably really hard too as a parent, but then
it is.
yeah, and you have another daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how does your other daughter feel about you and your daughter
Mm.
having lupus? Because I think that also brings a really interesting perspective. And then also, like, I guess your husband, like, what is the whole family's role in terms of like what you have to do in general? I guess, well, growing up or even now, like activity wise, I don't know, where's everyone at? Because they might be moved out.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Well, let's see. Kaya is my youngest daughter, and she knows I do watch her like a hawk. For a while, she had lost a bunch of hair, and at a time she had low vitamin D, and so I would be like, so I watch her closely, but she's also very educated, and so she watches herself. She's lovely and wonderful at listening to us and checking in. She's such a nurturing soul, so that part is good. I'm grateful she doesn't have it. And my husband knows that he's got three strong females in his life, and it's our job to state and demand whatever we think we need from him. And so I think he knows that we are educated, and he will take a backseat role in it. I think he supports us, I feel, in whatever I needed. He even went to a point like, oh, do you need stem cell? Well, let's go get stem cell. I'm like, I think it's like, I don't even know, 500,000. He's like, okay, well, let's go figure out how to do it. And I'm like, no, we don't do it like that. So, I think he wants the best for us, and he just has to find ways to do that. But we have to tell him at times what we need.
yeah, I think communication, it sounds like communication is so important and being open, honest, and transparent. And when it comes to your social life, how did that work? How did you tell people around you you had lupus? How did you tell people that your daughter also has lupus? How did that
Mm,
go? What were the reactions or
mm. You get a mixed bag sometimes depending on who you tell. The close friends, of course, are great. The people who give you the advice, like, have you gone to this chiropractor? He's so good. He can heal you, which, you want to trip them and knock them down for giving that advice. So not everyone has been like, wow. Some people have been like, oh, okay. So I have learned that I can be choosy in how I tell people. Not everyone is worthy of it. And yes, the people in my life may know, but maybe they're not always on my support team. They're not the first ones I come to. Maybe I don't even talk to them about lupus. And this is me wising up to be like, I only have X amount of energy throughout the day. You're not worth my energy to spend it trying to explain it to you, to get you to try to pay attention to me. I'm choosing to not do that to you. So if you want to ask me a question, how I'm doing, I'm fine, because I'm not going to get into that with you. And I think all of those things become a choice when we don't have endless energy each day that renews at the start of every day. And so I've become a very choosy chick.
No, that's perfect. I think you need to definitely like pick and choose your battles. I think my mom says that a lot. She's like, just like don't bother with some people. It's just not worth your time or energy. And you can put your energy into something else that you will be happier into putting your energy into.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
very
I think it's interesting. I've heard from a few women, like roughly my age, as they go through autoimmune and, these diseases where it's almost like we get like these blinders where we're like, all this other people and crap around, you are going to go on the outside. I'm going to be really focused on it. And I think women might not demand that in life just any other way. Like they don't feel like they can push people out of their lives or do some of these things or demand the best for them. But having this disease has allowed me to be like, no, no, that's not okay. I'm not going to do that. Or no, I'm choosing not to be friends with you and I'm going to move forward without it. So I think it's good. I wish that all women could do it at a much earlier age, but I also know that we aren't instantly born with some of these things. We have to experience some of the pain in order to know that we're worthy of something else.
Yeah, and because of all of this and your journey and your experiences, you wrote the book, The Girlfriend's Guide to Lupus. We talked
hmm
briefly about it here and there, but let me know what this book is about, what inspired you to write this book.
Well, what inspired me was when I was diagnosed and I only found those dry, boring books. I wanted a real book that said real things. Like I want the real talk because your doctor's trying to tell you, so many things when you're diagnosed. Like here's the drugs and here's what you're going to do. That really didn't tell you what life would be like. So I wanted to write a book that would be a tell-all from a woman's perspective, as the majority of people with lupus are women. So, and I can only write from a woman's view. And I wanted things that my doctors never said, like why sex is different and how it changes and um, why mental health is different and like all of the how can you travel and what do you do about your hair that's falling out. I wanted these real components all pulled together, and I also wanted women to know that they still had that control. They still have control. Like you don't give your health over to your doctor. You still have an active role in how you show up in this life. And since as we talked about before, there's no quick fixes to our health, but there are things that we can do every single day.
And I guess what has been the commentary or feedback, or have you received any responses from other people now reading your book?
Yeah, it's so funny. I was just looking on Amazon where the book is. You get some reports, and I'm like, wow, someone in Japan got my book. Someone in Australia. Like, it's wild to me. I try to be kind to myself by I don't read a lot of reviews. I don't listen to my podcast because I know that I can be critical. So this is one way I try to keep myself on the upbeat. But what I have heard is lovely. There are times where I have cried with joy to hear people's pleasure and that they found any value in it. And I think one of the overarching things I've heard is that this book can apply to those who have autoimmune diseases, which I only intended it for lupus. I have Sjogren's as well, but I intended it for lupus, and so I think that's such a lovely asset to be told that.
So you have Sjogren's as well. And how is it like
hmm
navigating like both the autoimmune diseases
Mm.
together and this
Um,
too? Or do you take medication for both?
Well, luckily the same medication. So I was first diagnosed with Sjogren's, and then 8 years later is when I got the final, kind of thing of lupus. So I blame everything on lupus, which it might be hard to see. We know that roughly 25 to 30% of people who have lupus may have another autoimmune condition as well. And mine showed up, that way. So, the eyes and the mouth, yes, get moody. But maybe lupus is unfairly blamed, but it all comes down to lupus for me. But it's not. It's hard to know, right? It's hard to know. And someone is starting to go through, I'm like a perimenopause person. So I'm like, well, is this headache from lupus? Is it from just my uterus being, a jerk? Like it's hard to know where one thing starts and another thing ends.
Even if you start thinking about it or overthinking about it, I feel like you get even more confused and you rather just know that you have these conditions and it's like, okay, how do I navigate life with this now? Because if you
Yeah,
start
that's right.
putting the pieces together, it's nice to know where things come from, but it can also just like get you down a whole rabbit hole and like you don't know anything.
Yeah. 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 The ultimate goal is like, how do I manage it? And, how do I help myself feel better?
Are there any challenges that come with living with Sjogren's?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I had really, really bad vision, like -10, which is terrible vision. And in my glasses, my eyes were like little eyes. And I had to wear glasses all the time because I couldn't wear contacts because I would be peeling them off my eyes from dry eyes of having Sjogren's. And I did have this procedure done where it's an internal lens implant. I don't know if you've ever heard of these, where contact lenses are implanted inside my eye, which now allows me to have perfect vision. And it's definitely helped. But I think for me, the big ones of the eyes and the mouth being attacked, cavities and all of those lovely associations are just something that comes along with it.
But you've finally found how to manage it with your medication, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, it's just yeah, I know the word journey seems to be overused, but it is a journey. It's a roller coaster at times. It's, maybe it's small world one day and then Thunder Mountain the next. And you just kind of have to be able to be like, okay, can I look ahead? How much can I see around the corner? And how much am I going to go through? And how do I keep myself safe with my seatbelt on, but also enjoy the ride as you go?
So I wanted to end off with an advice segment. So what advice would you give to a parent who lives with a condition and their child has it too?
I would say the best advice is to just keep an open conversation going on between you and your child, being aware of what you're going through so that you can both be best for you and also be best for your child. Because sometimes if we don't know what we're going through, it's hard to be there for that family member and that person in your life. So I would tell them to be aware, read up, get some mental health help if you need it so that you can be present. That's a challenge nowadays. Be present for that family member and that child in your life.
And what are some tips that you would give to someone who has been recently diagnosed with lupus?
I would say arm yourself with education, whatever type of education you need. Read all, listen to all, talk to all. The second thing I would say, which I think is really important, is to see if you can find yourself a lupus friend. Use social media. That's very helpful there. Often I meet women who don't know anyone with lupus, why it's so lonely, and then they have to explain to their friends over and over and over why they feel bad again. If you have just one lupus friend, you can just be like, today sucks, and your friend will be like, I know, I got you. What can I do? And so I think those two things with education, awareness, and maybe one friend that's at least a little bit easier, slightly easier to go into managing the disease.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for coming on this week's podcast episode. We talked about your diagnosis of lupus, a little bit about your diagnosis with Sjogren's. We talked about your diagnosis journey, the symptoms, the challenges, the different specialists that you see, kind of the social and emotional support. We talked a little bit about medications, lifestyle changes that you've made, the book that you wrote, as well as your daughter's diagnosis journey. And then we ended off the podcast episode kind of talking about some supports and wrapped it up with then talking about sort of some comments and feedback you received on your book and then some advice. So everyone, like, comment, subscribe, check out Amanda's book, which I will leave down below, and I will see everyone in 2 weeks on Take a Pain Check. Thank you so much, Amanda. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.